Hey everybody, and Tony here with a review of Claude-Michel Schönberg's and Alain Boulbil's Miss Saigon, which celebrated its 25th anniversary in 2014 at London's Prince Edward Theatre, which I saw at the UCI Kinowelt Theatres. And this was also the same production done by Cameron Mackintosh. Miss Saigon has been very famous for a few good reasons. Number one, if it weren't obvious already, this was based on one of my most favorite Puccini operas of all time, Madama Butterfly, which I will gladly review as there is a production at the Staatsoper im Schillertheater next week. And while the entire opera was originally set in Nagasaki, Japan during the 1900s, with the tragic romance being set between the young 15-year-old geisha Cho-Cho-san with the American lieutenant Benjamin Franklin Pinkerton, the entire action was transported to the 1970s in Vietnam with the tragic romance being set between the young 17-year-old barmaid Kim with the American GI Chris. And unlike Pinkerton, Chris is a lot more sympathetic and not that much of a jerk. And there were also other characters who had their roles maintained in this musical, like Sharpless being transported to John, Kate Pinkerton being transported to Ellen, Sorrow or Dolore being transported to Tom, Goro being transported to the engineer but a lot less snively, and even having the two roles of Cho-Cho-san's uncle, the Bonze, and Cho-Cho-san's originally betrothed, Prince Yamadori, into one character who is Thuy, who is also Kim's cousin and original betrothed one. The only character to not have a musical adaptation was Suzuki. Yes, we have Gigi, but she only appears in one scene and she's never heard of again, as this is mainly Kim's story. This is mainly Kim's struggle. And speaking of Kim, this role was what made Lea Salonga's fame as a musical theater actress jettison. Yes, she also had the role of Eponine from another musical composed by Claude-Michel Schönberg, Les Miserables, under her belt. But this was one of the roles that also further jettisoned her career. And not to mention a lot of other actresses who portrayed this role. Kim has basically become one of the most coveted leading lady roles, totally up there with the likes of Belle from Beauty and the Beast, Maria from The Sound of Music, Anna from The King and I, and even Christine from The Phantom of the Opera. There's been no shortage of amazing actresses, mostly of Asian descent and mostly of Filipino descent, who have embodied this role. And here's something really interesting. Did you know that the woman who played Selena from Sesame Street, Annette Kalud, also portrayed Kim? Well, she was also an understudy to Lea Salonga's Broadway performance, and she's been also really well known in this role. This musical, aside from Les Miserables, was also one of Claude-Michel Schönberg's most famous musicals of all time, as it's also had its fair share of being performed internationally. My first experience with Miss Saigon was completely by chance, as I saw an excerpt of this musical performed by a couple of students from a university, well, basically Southwestern University in Cebu, and it was a very strong impression until I watched this musical and was totally excited about it, seeing that this was performed in one of the movie theaters did my excitement for this particular musical grow. And boy, was I completely stoked. The music was just absolutely thrilling. The story was exciting and heart-pounding. And believe it or not, there were times that I almost cried during certain scenes. It is just so emotional. It is just so thrilling. It is just so heart-wrenching in some moments. But more than anything, it is just so exciting. mostly thanks to the music, mostly thanks to the singers who portrayed these characters, and of course, the superb score done by Schönberg and Boulbil. Going into the production, I'm not going to mince words here. It is just so well done. It is colorful. You could definitely tell that the people behind this production really went out of their way to make something that is so uplifting, invigorating, extreme, and awesome. It feels like you're watching a film, which should be no surprise, as it felt like I was watching a film just coming alive in front of my very eyes with all the effects, all the great camera work, and everything done in between. And the costumes look absolutely gorgeous as they really complement the overall grand visual effects of this particular production. So what more can I say about this production? It is extremely outstanding. Everything went together. Everything was meshed well together like I'm watching a film come to life. And it's just so invigorating. And now we get to the singers, starting off with Eva Noblezada as our title heroine, Kim. Now, for someone who was quite young at the time, being about 18 or 19 years old, to portray this very iconic character, she did fabulously. She was an absolute darling on stage. She had the grace and beauty of a seraphim, while still maintaining that youthful charm and innocence. And you could definitely see this wonderful young star bloom. And every time she opened her mouth, she sang with emotional abandon, musical precision, and a sense of overall quietness that makes her character come alive, that makes her bloom on the stage. And she was the absolute star. She not only has a very bright future as an overall performer given her young age, but she is definitely a very, very committed artist. She really knew how to embody this role with grace, beauty, innocence, strength, and courage. And she brought all of these traits in such a masterful manner, evidenced by her singing, which she was able to pour out with abandon, and a lot of great acting chops. She really knew how to portray all the situations that this young woman had to go through, and she did fabulously. Chris was portrayed by the ever superb Alistair Brammer, and I hate to sound corny, but he has the grace of an Apollo, the heroicism of a Perseus, and the melancholy and overall charm of an Orpheus, not to mention his musical talent. He really was an absolute charmer on stage and was an amazing actor. His tenor voice was absolutely clarion, his technique was absolutely thrilling, and he had a wonderful and engaging stage presence. It was a very strong stage presence. It was engaging, it was powerful yet charming, and it was masculine but youthful. He really knows how to play the overall juxtapositions of this character. Someone who has a duty to his country, but someone who is so full of fire and passion. And he brought all of these traits into one amazing mixture. And he really knew how to portray this character with charm, a little bit of roguishness, and a lot of blood and guts. And his chemistry with Eva Noblezada's Kim was so palpable. You could really feel the heat going on between these two awesome singers, and they were just so fabulous. And I choked when he saw Kim's dead body after she shot herself. And it's just absolutely riveting. And he was just so gut-wrenching in this portrayal of a very sympathetic anti-hero. And then we get probably the gentleman who stole the show for me, John Briones, as the engineer. He was gloriously over the top, yet also manages to maintain a lot of great human qualities to make this character come alive. And his singing was really, really fine. He has a very fine and focused voice, and he really knew how to belt it out with the best of his abilities, and his solo number was just absolutely a riot. He really was an absolute charmer, and he was just at the top level in terms of his acting and overall portrayal of this wonderful character role. And then we go to Hugh Maynard as John, who gives a lot of dignity and a sense of masculinity to this wonderful character, and he has a very fine and focused baritone voice. And he's just a very handsome guy on stage. He has a very muscular presence, helped by an overall charm and absolute poetry that he gives to this character. Every time he graces the stage, he is both commanding, yet at the same time very sympathetic. A great combination when it comes to this wonderful character. Ellen was portrayed by Tamsin Carroll, who gives the role a lot of sympathy, charm, and just a great sense of brilliance, helped with her superb mezzo contralto voice. Then we go to Kwang Ho Hong singing the role of Thuy. And he has a superb, dramatic tenor sound, which he sings with authority and abandon. And he has a very youthful yet masculine presence on stage to really make this character come alive. Yes, it is a very thankless part, but he still manages to imbue this character with dignity, strength, and an overall determination to make this gentleman come alive. Rochelle Ango's Gigi was sympathetic, and she really knew how to hit those wonderful mezzo-soprano notes with a great technique, even though her vibratos do tend to be kind of wide, but you could definitely say that those vibratos were quite useful in terms of making the viewers understand her situation in terms of how she is feeling at this moment. And not to mention, the big bonus for this production is the grand finale, where we even have some of the original actors who portrayed the roles of Kim, Chris, and the engineer, the wonderful Lea Salonga, Simon Bowman, and Jonathan Pryce gracing the stage with such superb renditions of the songs being performed. And when I saw Lea Salonga appear on stage, she was just an absolute goddess. She had a very striking presence, which I gladly bowed down to, as she was the original Kim, and she was the Kim who captured our hearts. And we even have the pleasure of having Eva Noblezada, who was able to fill in Lea Salonga's shoes by being unique and having her own sense of charm. And just by seeing Lea Salonga was just absolutely a thrill. She had the grace of a goddess, and she was just absolutely wonderful in terms of her stage presence. And we even have the treat of having the original engineer, Jonathan Pryce. While John Briones' delivery of the engineer was a little bit more over the top, Jonathan Pryce's was a lot more subdued and subtle. And while Alistair Brammer's Chris was a lot more youthful sounding and basically a lot more focused, Simon Bowman's voice sounded a little bit more aged, but it still maintained that focus and that clarion ring. So overall, the singing, the production, the conducting, everything was awesome. Everyone from the main cast to the supporting cast to the orchestra to the chorus, everyone did fabulously. And for those of you who have seen this production, please let me know what you thought about it. Did you really, really love it? Or did you feel that there were some things that could have been improved? Comment below and let me know. Well, that's all for now. Be sure to tune in tomorrow for my review of Verdi's Rigoletto, starring Siobhan Stagg as Gilda at the Deutsche Oper Berlin. So until then, good night, everybody.